We've been given a great privilege as Christians to represent God in this world. But the irony is it sometimes doesn't feel like it. In Romans 1, the Apostle Paul says, "I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it's the power of God for the salvation of everyone who believes." We get to be carriers of this message of hope that can connect a person eternally with God. But in case anyone hasn't noticed, communicating this message got a whole lot harder the last few decades. In fact, there's hostility. So here's the question of this series. How could we become effective in a hostile environment? One of the words used to explain the way our society currently operates is secularism. Today, many people think this means the absence of any religion in the public square, and that this is something we've somehow agreed upon together as New Zealanders. But this isn't true. Our nation's first parliamentary debate was actually about who would open in prayer, which is to say, the fact that we were going to be Christian in our general values and practices was assumed. The question they had instead was which Christian denomination would get the upper hand through praying first. Because being secular for us means the separation of church and state powers. It was never about the exclusion of Christian religion from the public square. And so a man was sent down the street to bring back the first pastor he found to pray, and that's how they resolved the problem. You see, our primary values as a nation come from the Christian faith, including our cultural views on compassion, charity, equality, tolerance, human rights, and more. The challenge we face is that the public have been cut off from their history, and so much so that even many of our leaders in government, media, and education don't know the history. And so the word secular has changed meanings, and this is how we get to this situation, with hostility now ironically growing toward the very faith that established so many of our values. And the problem is real. So what are we to do? Because hostility is there, and we're not going to be able to avoid it. Well, here's a suggestion. What if we were to look at Jesus' example more closely? Because he lived in a hostile environment too. And I wonder if this is something we've maybe not noticed much because we've had it so good for so long. Jesus lived under Roman occupation, and saying the wrong thing at the wrong time could literally get you crucified. But there was more, because the religious leaders of the day were also at odds with Jesus, to the point where they were regularly trying to trap him in his words and wanted him dead. So if you feel you've got a pressured environment, consider what he faced. But then look at how he responded. Because yes, he was sometimes really fearless, like when he criticized religious leaders for their hypocrisy. But there were also plenty of things he stayed silent on. There were questions he refused to answer, even when pressed. And if you look closely, you'll see it was sometimes really awkward and tense. For example, he was asked in various ways if he believed himself to be the Messiah or Son of God, and he stayed silent. He refused to directly answer the question. And this question is a major theme of the four Gospels too, because it's an important question. Who is this man? Just a human, or the man from God? Even John the Baptist, in a moment of doubt, asks if Jesus thinks he's the promised one. And Jesus' reply was, "Consider the miracles that are happening and work it out for yourself." He still didn't give an answer. The only time Jesus did talk openly about this was when with his disciples behind closed doors. In contrast with the public, he kept this mystery going right up until his final trials. The high priest asked him a direct question, and it was only then that Jesus finally gave a direct answer. And it needs noting that it got him killed. You see, the principle is this: if a person is interested, engage with them. But if they're disinterested, you only try to intrigue them. While if they're hostile, you deflect them. And I think this is what we see Jesus doing. And it enabled him to thrive despite limitations. Sometimes opposition is intimidating. It can make us scared to even really talk or engage. But what if we could learn from the example of Jesus here, who engaged with the interested, but merely intrigued the disinterested while deflecting the hostile? Because with this approach, Jesus thrived despite the hostility, and so could we.